Hello everyone and welcome to our COVID-19 weekly updates. I'm Benson Necrobins, your host for this segment. Last week we had the opportunity of meeting up with the Governor for Northern Province, Honorable Gary Juffa, and who shared his thoughts on key areas that pose as risk factors for coronavirus or COVID-19, on how and where it is likely to gain entry into Northern Province, and how best people need to engage their time and practices during the state of emergency period. Let's start with the national government's perspective on the issue of coronavirus or COVID-19 affecting Papua New Guinea.
Look, I believe the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea has done the right thing by going into lockdown and declaring a state of emergency. He has appointed the police commissioner, who is a very capable person. He has appointed a good team of people to manage the crisis. It's a very difficult time for Papua New Guinea, but despite all of that, the government, the Prime Minister have done the best they can, and I appreciate their efforts. There is a lot of negativity and criticism from people who are fearful and anxious, but above all, I believe the government is doing a great job in managing COVID-19 thus far. And what we need to do is listen to the government and the authorities and abide by the practices of maintaining good proper hygiene, washing your hands every 20 minutes, social distancing, staying 1.5 meters apart from others, making sure that you sleep well and you eat a healthy diet and rest well and think positive. These are the elements of what will help you to overcome COVID-19. And I believe that message is being spread far and wide and clear by the Prime Minister and his government, and I feel that the national government is doing the best it can, and we should all support it in what it is doing at this stage.
The threat of coronavirus on our society can only be won by strictly observing the necessary precautions and prevention orders circulated by the national government through the National Emergency Controller and down to the province. Significantly, to achieving the desired outcome in the fight against COVID-19 are resources at this point in time, and most importantly, money.
We put aside about 2.5 million kina specifically for attending to COVID-19. About 1 million kina of that is allocated for the PHA, and the 1.5 is allocated for the administration and the police, so that they can get out there. We've also allocated 50,000 for each LNG president, and I believe those funds should be made available. But I have to emphasize here that all these fundings are tied to programs. They're not just monies that are given to individuals. They are programs, they are budgets, they are plans. For example, this is the updated plan from the administrator, the operation and work plan in response to coronavirus, and he has detailed, his team have detailed every expense in here. And then I've insisted on that because these are PSIP funds, that they belong to the people of Oro, and I want to make sure that they're spent according to how they are supposed to be spent. We get a lot of accusations in regards to misuse of funds in the past, and I want to make sure that in this instance, we manage our funds in a very transparent manner.
True to every word said that describes COVID-19 is that coronavirus or COVID-19 does not move around on its own, but people move it around. In this case, and for the virus to enter Oro province, it will have to be through the main entry points, which are the airport, the seaport, including the land. Oro province shares borders with 3 provinces: Morobe province, Central province, and Middle Bay province. Each of these 3 provinces have border links into Oro province through air, sea, and of course by land.
In regards to the border areas anywhere in the world are always very difficult to manage. Our 3 border areas, the Central Province border, the Morobe Province border, and the Middle Bay Province border, I would say that the most difficult currently is the Morobe Province border because of the betel nut trade of betel nut between here and Morobe Province. So we have deployed police to the areas, but because of the vast coastline, it is becoming very difficult to apprehend or deter people involved in these activities. Every time they target a particular location, the people involved move to another location. And the price of betel nut has gone very high. As a result, people are encouraged to engage in this activity. Unfortunately, betel nut is also a transmission risk for COVID-19 because it is an activity that involves the exchange of, or the interaction of people, close interaction of people. And this is how COVID-19 spreads. COVID-19 spreads when people don't practice social distancing, when they don't practice good hygiene, when they are congregated in very close proximity to one another. That's how COVID-19 spread. And this is the reason why betel nut is an activity that is being targeted by the government in trying to regulate it as much as possible. So there are resources placed in regards to trying to control this issue. Currently, we have an issue with the Morobe province not being monitored or not being managed by the provincial government of the Morobe province. And I would like to urge the governor of Morobe, my counterpart, if he can put some resources into policing the Morobe border with Oro province, because we are trying to curb or discourage this. All it takes is one person to have COVID-19 to come into your province. Once he enters, then that COVID-19 will spread quite rapidly, and it will cause a lot of problems for all of us. And it threatens basically the elderly and those with weak immune systems. So that's why we are very concerned about the transmission of COVID-19 by betel nut and other similar activities. The Milne province border with Oro is very low risk, I would say. There's very little movement in that area, except by criminal elements that are going back and forth for whatever reasons, whatever purposes, sea pirates. But again, the police on both sides are monitoring what's happening, and we have not heard anything of significant concern. With the central province, there was an incident where some people crossed over illegally into Oro province. I believe a group of young men who were coming from the islands. I understand they were all robbed. I understand they were mistreated by people on the trail, because the people on the trail are also concerned about what is coming into their province and into their community. So I would discourage anyone from trying to cross the borders to come into Oro province and even to go into central province, because communities are taking their own measures. I've noticed that, and it's very commendable, that communities are going into lockdown mode and they are very concerned about who's coming and going. Police are also monitoring. I was informed by the police that they do regular checkups with the community over there, and if anyone is unlawfully found to have crossed, they will have them arrested. In regards to the Musa central province, that particular border, there is traditional border crossing that still goes on, but again, I think it's low risk. We have to note that there has been an international embargo on flights into Papua New Guinea, so the risk of COVID-19 coming into PNG is very low, very minimal. The tests that they conducted so far have resulted in negative results. Those who were found positive were then found negative, obviously because they recovered. But it's unusual, and the government is still trying to understand how it is that even though they were positive, they did not seem to have infected anyone, and they recovered quite quickly. So we also have to understand that you can recover from COVID-19. If you catch COVID-19, it doesn't mean you're going to be bedridden and die. It just means that you can recover from it. But if you have an existing illness or ailment, or if you're an elder person with a weak immune system, for instance, or anyone with a very weak immune system, then you are at greater risk. But a very small percentage fall in that category.
When asked about the flights into Gilwe Airport, the governor said it was safe because the country still had an international flights locked down.
I believe they're quite safe because we still have an international lockdown. As long as we maintain an international lockdown, we minimize the risk of COVID-19 entering PNG and spreading into provinces, districts, villages, communities, etc. So, as far as I'm concerned, flights are very low risk. Once they open international borders, then flights become high risk. But at this stage, everyone in PNG who would have had COVID during this 14-day period, they would have shown the symptoms, and we would have at least treated them and tested them and so forth. But as far as I'm concerned, flights are low risk and they will continue. Airlines, I believe, possibly only Air Niugini is currently operating because the other airlines are finding it very difficult to operate during this very difficult time because the government has also imposed social distancing within the aeroplane. So that means you're not going to sit next to people, you sit in spread out areas. But there are still flights carrying government officials and private people who need to work and do business and so forth. That's still taking place, but the risk is very low. The risk increases once the international borders are open. Currently, our international borders are closed.
Governor Gary Juffa, as we all know, a very vocal advocate, if not the outstanding political leader against illegal logging in Papua New Guinea that we have seen to date. Unfortunately, a logging ship that had departed China 2 weeks ago would have done better on a different time than to come into orbit at this time around, only to find itself still floating outside for more than 14 days by now.
One major risk though that I am very concerned about, and I've raised this with the SOE, is the risk of log ships and fishing vessels. Now we have an incident where a log ship came directly from China and came into Leh, and it was cleared after 1 day and then into Oro province. I am totally against that type of behavior and activity. The protocol is that it should have been cleared in Leh and it should do its mandatory 14-day quarantine before it comes to Kokoleda. There's a possibility that the period of time from when it left China and arrived in Leh, that is in itself a period of time that's acceptable for quarantine purposes, but to be strict and very technical about it, we should have such vessels quarantined in their first port of call for 14 days before they come here and they can carry on any business.
He also shared his thoughts on the level of risks against the importance in education for our children and how best teachers and students in schools can be able to maintain social distancing as well as washing of hands and maintaining general hygiene practices.
I think, it's normal for people to be anxious and panic during this type of situations. However, the risk is very low. As I've said, we don't have COVID-19 in Oro. Most likely don't have COVID-19 in PNG prevalent. Currently, the positives have not increased. Even though they're doing testing, it shows that because of our government's decision to lock down the international borders, we have stopped COVID-19, from spreading in PNG. So at this stage, I would say it's a very low risk, and I encourage teachers and children to go back to school and carry on with normal lives until such time as once we detect a case in Mosby, there has been a breach of the border, then we can, take necessary measures. But at this stage, I feel that, teachers and students can go back to school and they can carry on with the process of education. That it's not a major risk. They can practice social distancing that should be practiced in the classrooms. They can practice washing their hands, that is not necessary. So all the schools should have facilities where children can wash their hands regularly. Soap should be made available. If that is not the possibility, then the provincial government will be speaking to the sector chairman for education and the PA, and definitely look at providing some assistance to schools so that they can have these facilities. And even though we don't have COVID-19, it's a good idea to practice good hygiene anyway, so that in the instance that when it does come, we are already used to this situation. Everything we do in life, we have to factor COVID-19 now. That's a reality. How do we live with it? But at this stage, we must not be fearful or anxious, or overly worried or overthink. We have to factor in these rules in regards to hygiene, diet, cleanliness, social distancing, all those points that have been raised, including the 11 points raised by the Secretary for Education. They have to be adhered to.
Some of the very vital services, such as toll-free numbers for the general public to call for information, are not available at this point in time as yet. And the governor expressed concern and said he would be following up with those responsible.
Thank you. I have asked about this. I am informed by the PA and the PPC and the CEO for PHA that as of today, we have not yet received any toll-free numbers, which is alarming, and I am worried about that. And I will be following up with the government and the SOE, those responsible, to move on this as quickly as they can so that we can have our numbers set up. But always regarded as a low-risk province in regards to COVID-19 risk in PNG. And so, that can be the reason why they're not responding as quickly to Oro, because they've got other priority provinces that are high risk that they are responding to. For example, West Sepik and East Sepik, very high risk Western province. These are deemed very high risk because of their border area and the movement of people across those borders, international borders I'm talking about here. But we will find out, and I anticipate that before the end of this week there will be toll-free numbers that are established for that purpose.
Among other important points raised, and equally were his thoughts on some very basic and simple aspects of life that people should be preoccupied with, not only during the state of emergency period, but also after the virus is gone.
Look, firstly, thank you NBC for doing this interview, and thank you media team from our administration. They're doing a marvelous job. And please get a copy of the Northern Observer. The next edition is almost out, and once it is out, every quarter we'll have this newspaper, and if all goes well, we're hoping that by next year it will become a monthly paper, and then there'll be sections where people can also write their opinions and share ideas, tell stories, etc., etc. Oro will have a proper newspaper. So, we're working on our radio, and we're looking at how we can even think of the possibility of having a television station, but that's in the future. To the people of Oro, I want them to be positive. I want you to take as much time as you can to spend with your families. It's very challenging and difficult times. This is not the time now to be anxious or fearful, but this is now the time to make adjustments in your life, to look at your diet, to look at how you've been living, to look at what you've been doing, and how you've been treating one another. For instance, many of us over time have forgotten about our elders. Many of us have forgotten that our elders exist and that they need us. It's part of our culture and society to care and love and take care of our elders, but over the years we haven't been doing that. Well, COVID-19 has reminded us, because they are the most vulnerable people in our community. If we get COVID-19, they will be the first people that will be targeted by COVID-19, our elders. So I want us to revisit this culture of ours of caring and sharing with our elders. I also want us to really focus on something that I've been talking about for a very long time, and that is your personal health. Focus on your personal health. Do 20 minutes of exercise a day if you can. Get a bit of sun. Drink water. Avoid processed foods. Avoid alcohol and cigarettes and little. These substances do not do any good for you. You are supposed to be a temple of God. If God is the creator and He created your temple and gifted it to you, then by abusing your body, you are actually disrespecting God. And we call ourselves a Christian country, but unfortunately many of us don't behave like Christians. And now is the time to reflect on this. I remember that when COVID-19 came into the Pacific, the country of Samoa was the first country to go into lockdown, and the Prime Minister in Samoa declared a 2-week fast. So the whole country fasted for 2 weeks. They stayed home. Even the entire country's churches, all the NGOs, everyone came together. They stayed home. They worked together. And today Samoa is the one country that does not have a single COVID-19 case.
Samoa was one of the first countries in the Pacific to enforce border security measures back in early February. This has so far been a life-saving decision by government.
We've been anticipating this, especially when it came out as a brand new virus, unknown to the whole world. So when it started, exploding and then propagating to the rest of the world, we knew that it was just a matter of when it will arrive. So I think that's when we started restricting incoming of mainly the tourists and our visitors, because it's the human is now the only known host.
Because they were able to respond very early, and they did the right thing, and that was to look at themselves, to fast, to show humility, and to respect one another and respect the authorities. And that's what I want people of all to consider. And I also want to thank the people of Oro. I was very impressed with how they all reacted when COVID-19 was announced. People came together, they worked, communities, societies went into lockdown, churches, NGOs, everyone, the Council of Chiefs, public servants, police, they all work well together, and Oro has really, is a shining example in the country, I can tell you that. At this juncture, I also want to thank our young men and women, the youth who have been cleaning the town. They are making our town look very beautiful under our youth program. We will be continuing to fund this youth program, including we will also organize training for the young people that are involved. They are making our town look much beautiful. And I'll be talking to the business houses so that the business houses can also do the same. They can clean up their shop fronts, repaint their stores, and start looking more like a town. People of Oro, thank you very much. I appreciate all that you do and all the sacrifices that you make. And together we can build a better tomorrow.
The challenges may seem unreal and minimal, but if we haven't learned from the world around us, we haven't learned at all. The onus is on us as individuals. Our conduct will affect us, our spouses, our children, our family, our clansmen and women, our community, our district, our province, and our country as a whole. Be responsible. Isolate Oro from COVID-19. We thank Governor Gary Juffa for his insight, updates, and response towards coronavirus in Oro province. Until then, live the new normal. I'm Benson from Isolate Oro from COVID-19.